Tonight at 10, thousands of ambulance staff in England and Wales will go on strike at midnight as ministers express concerns about safety. Paramedics and support staff are taking further action in their dispute over pay and conditions. They say the current situation is not sustainable.
We don't meet minimum levels now on a day-to-day basis. I cannot stress enough how difficult it is for us to be able to deliver that care to patients.
Here at Westminster, the government's planning ahead. It wants to change the law to force unions to offer emergency cover during strikes. Labour say that's insulting to workers.
Yes, we'll have the latest on the series of disputes in different public sectors and the likelihood of any resolution at an early stage. Also tonight, 2022 was a year of climate extremes. Weather experts say that Europe and the polar regions were hardest hit by global warming. The latest on the fighting in eastern Ukraine, where the mining town of Solidar is reported now to be under Russian control. And the popularity of gaming helps boost the UK's home entertainment industry to record levels.
And stay with us here on BBC News for continuing coverage and analysis from our team of correspondents in the UK and around the world.
Good evening. Senior managers in the NHS in England and Wales are warning that the strike by ambulance staff, which starts in about 2 hours' time, could be more damaging than the strike which took place before Christmas. Thousands of paramedics and support staff will take action in the dispute over pay. And ministers at Westminster have raised fears over the lack of specific agreement on the nature of emergency cover. They have published a draft new law requiring a minimum level of safety during strikes in defined sectors. Now, those minimum levels would apply to fire, ambulance and rail services in England, Wales and Scotland, and also to health services, education, nuclear decommissioning and border security. But in these areas, the aim would be to reach voluntary agreements. And of course, it's important to underline that any new law would not be in place in time to affect the current strikes. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes has the latest.
Ambulance service is the patient breathing.
It's calm but busy in this control room for the North West Ambulance Service.
I will make that request for you, OK, so don't worry.
Preparations are underway for another strike day tomorrow. Taking part are members of the two biggest unions, the GMB and Unison, including ambulance crews and call handlers. All this when the health service is already under intense pressure.
The strike comes on top of a really difficult winter. I've not faced anything like this in my whole NHS career.
Dr. Chris Grant says we will all have to think carefully about how we use the service.
I'm really confident that we're doing everything we possibly can to deliver a high-quality service, but I think I've got to be brutally honest as well, is that there are some patients that we simply won't be able to send an ambulance to. But the public know that, and they know that we'll do everything we can to prioritise those who need us the most. So we have to be honest with the public, but I think as long as the public know we'll do everything we can to protect them, I think we'll work well together.
And was there a faint or blackout just before the injury?
The message from the ambulance service is pretty straightforward. They're asking us tomorrow to take stock, to think carefully before calling for an emergency ambulance, to ask ourselves, is this really a life-threatening emergency, something like a heart attack, a stroke or a seizure? If the answer to that question is yes, then absolutely do call an ambulance, and they're confident the measures they've put in place to mitigate the strike action will mean help can reach you as soon as possible.
Not everyone will be joining the picket lines tomorrow. Daniel works for the West Midlands Ambulance Service. He's not striking, but understands why others might.
Personally, for me, it was more about kind of patient safety. So bearing in mind if a lot of staff are off on this strike, we have to factorise into account kind of patient safety being compromised, and for me that was something I didn't wish to kind of be a part of.
And concerns over patient safety are one factor that ministers say is behind new legislation introduced today to ensure minimum service levels in England, Scotland and Wales are maintained in the public sector during strikes.
Whilst we absolutely believe in the right to strike, we're duty-bound. We're duty-bound to protect the lives and the livelihoods of the British people. The British people need to know that when they have a heart attack, a stroke or a serious injury, that an ambulance will turn up, and that if they need hospital care, they have access to it.
But for paramedics like Paul, a GMB union rep with 15 years' experience working in the North West Ambulance Service, this strike is not just about pay. It's also about how well paramedics are able to care for their patients.
The quality of care comes when we're available to respond to those who need us. We're now not available to respond to those who need us because we're sat in hospitals or sat in the ambulances queuing for hours upon hours. And that stops us being able to deliver that quality care that we want to deliver to our patients. So where the government have said they're going to introduce minimal levels for strike, people who take strike moving forward, we don't meet minimum levels now on a day-to-day basis. I cannot stress enough how difficult it is for us to be able to deliver that care to patients.
Across most of England and all of Wales, the NHS is braced for another tough day of industrial action. Dominic Hughes, BBC News, Preston.
Well, in Scotland, primary schools were closed today as teachers